All right, today I have the one and only Michael Libertini. I really wanted to make this video specifically for people who have a desire to invest, but they're sitting on the bench. They're just honestly, they're seeing all the media, the news, the headlines, and living in fear right now and living in what ifs.
A soft landing is increasingly conceivable, but in no way inevitable. Now, if we do see the economy weaken, it's worth remembering that not all slowdowns are created equal. Many of us have been scarred by memories of the Great Recession or even the Volcker Recession, but they were particularly long and deep. As the airline folks might say, this time there's foam on the runway. Now, why do I say that? Well, a slowdown, if we have one, could create less dislocation in the labor market. Businesses tell me that hiring has become easier, but no one is eager to let go the frontline workers they fought so hard to find. Latent demand might mean a slowdown would have less impact on spending, as customers who put off purchases due to price and supply constraints finally have the opportunity to buy. And a slowdown wouldn't catch anybody by surprise, as businesses have been planning for a downturn for nearly 2 years. They've already slowed hiring, streamlined costs, managed inventory levels, and deferred investments. Banks have already cut back on marginal credit. So if a slowdown does come, the economy should find itself less vulnerable. The Fed's December meeting got a lot of attention. We acknowledged the progress on inflation and explicitly reaffirmed our willingness to hike if necessary. We also submitted our quarterly forecasts, which showed that we expect inflation to settle without additional hikes. In that context, one in which our forecasts are right and inflation does in fact continue to settle, most of us forecasted rate normalization to begin sometime this year. But the range of estimates was pretty wide, from 2 folks who forecasted no cuts to 1 person who forecasted as many as 6. I'd caution you to focus less on the rate path and more on the flight path. Is inflation continuing its descent? And is the broader economy continuing to fly smoothly? Conviction on both questions will determine the pace and timing of any change in rates. To close, I'll note there's no autopilot here, and the data that comes in this year will matter a lot. So I can't give any more guidance, if you will, from the flight desk. Forecasting is difficult. Conditions are ever evolving. And as they do, so will our approach. So buckle up. A reminder that buckling up is the proper safety call, even if you do expect a soft landing.
The future is unknown, right? And no one has a future like a crystal ball. No one can really say what's going to happen. But the point of this video is to say what we're seeing as professionals in the industry, you as a mortgage professional, me as a realtor, and how we're helping our clients get off the bench and to start to do the lifting themselves to really chew on what's out there and just determine what's good for them and their family, because it's going to be different for every single person. So real quick, Michael, you are a lender by trade, but you're also an experienced investor. You've done over 20 flips personally. You also have buy and holds. You have rentals that you keep and now you're investing in, and you're always looking for opportunities. I really use you as a sounding board, honestly, because you have all of these feelers out and a different network than I do. And so it's great because I'll have this idea of what is this possible? What about this thing? And what does the news say about this? And I feel like you've just always got tabs on different things that I'm not thinking about. So I'm glad to bring you in today just for the YouTube audience to kind of cut through the noise and give us some real tangible takeaways to start critically thinking. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Happy New Year to
Happy New Year.
your family, and all the listeners out there. But yeah, I wanted to kind of share maybe about what 2024 is looking like and bringing upon not only real estate investors, but the economy in general. I think some of the buzzwords that we kind of take away from a lot of the anecdotes that are kind of coming across in the political sphere and, a lot of those other places, you're like, what is the Fed saying? We all keep hearing about this thing called a soft landing, right? And so I want to kind of break that down and, kind of explain what that means and what that can mean to your business. So when I think about a soft landing, right? So let's rewind the clocks to 2019. Right.
Okay.
So we're all kind of trudging away, right? Where, interest rates are hovering around, 4.5%. And, everything's pretty healthy, right? We're in a robust market. There's a lot of activity going on. Still, inventory constrained for the folks out here in the islands, but there's a lot of activity and things moving, right? Affordability is near all-time highs. Rates are near all-time lows. And as we cruise through 2019. Well, 2020 happens, and we all know that the pandemic kind of takes hold, and nobody would have anticipated that the value of property during a lockdown would soar the way that it did. But it did. And so what it did is it pushed people to the brink, right, where inflation started to take hold, right? You cannot pump that much money into an economy and not have some expectation of inflation, right? But we saw double-digit inflation periods for months on end. And while it was like, get it while it's good, especially since money was so cheap, it also pushed a lot of families out because being able to afford in a healthy market was a challenge. Now, when there's frenzies and investors going all over the place, it was near impossible. You're seeing 30 plus offers on a single listing, things going for $100,000, $200,000 over that, that list price. So let's kind of fast forward to today, and we're looking at, okay, interest rates have done the exact opposite, right? So we pushed forward probably in about March of 2022, we went into correction mode and rates started increasing, right? So as rates started increasing, money became much more expensive, and the Fed, right, the central banking system said, we wanted to get inflation under control or we will tailspin the economy into a recession. Rates started jumping up at near record heights, and me being 15 years in the industry, I've never seen interest rates with that sort of velocity and an upward trend. And we were like, holy crap, what's going to happen to this, right? So we touched near that 8% mark, right? We were right there at that precipice of 8%, which since when I started to now, I've never written a mortgage at 8%. I locked my very highest one at 7.99, so I can still say I've never done a loan at 8%. But that did the exact opposite. It pushed affordability to all-time lows, right? So wages, right, what people were getting paid was not keeping up with the rate of inflation. And so the Fed really did have a tall order to put downward pressure onto the economy and all of that hot moving commerce that was happening inside of the globe. So now we're here today where interest rates, we feel, have crested, right? They've hit the apex of where we feel that they were going to be, right below that 8% mark, and they've started to come down. And in January of 2024, we're happy to say that, we're near around 6%, right? 6.5%, just depending on your criteria and your circumstance. What that signals for a lot of people is that, hey, rates coming down, I can go buy a house. Well, that poses a couple issues for a lot of people. And so we just use what I call the supply and demand curve, right? So we still have a very limited supply of homes available. Why? Because most people who own a home have an interest rate below 3.5%, right? And they would be silly and foolish to get rid of that very cheap money to go back into the marketplace and reborrow at 7 or better, right? So where we're at now is I like to call it who's playing chicken, right? So on one end of the car spectrum, you have interest rates, right? On the other end, you have affordability, right? And they're both running towards each other, and they're going, when they intersect, right? That's when there's going to be another frenzy, and we're going to see inflation persist. Mm-hmm. So for the families, for the investors that are looking to get a deal now, right? Now is the time. We have a very small window into which I feel you can still get a modestly priced home at a higher interest rate, but have the opportunity then to refinance that interest rate and then capture all of that savings. And I know people say it. I mean, a lot of people, you're hearing buzz all over the internet of, real estate professionals as well as investors saying, hey, now is the time. But to your point, I don't know what will get people off the couch. Mm-hmm. So as the Fed continues to monitor the inflation levels of the economy, they're going to consider rate cuts for 2024, right? So we've had rate hikes for almost 2 years. Now we're going to go in a series of rate cuts. And if you buy a home, well, let's just say you're pricing a home today at, say, 900. Well, we could tell you from the data that, $900,000 on a single family home, let's just say on the west side of Oahu, you're going to be paying upwards of, $6,000 a month to be able to afford that, right? And that's unheard of in, 5-6 years ago. $6,000 a month, that's crazy, right? But if you refinance, if rates get down, say 4.5 or even 5%, you may be more along the lines of 4,500 to $5,000, right? So that's the savings that it represents, is near $1,000 a month. And for people that are living very close to their limit on what they can afford, that $1,000 a month becomes very meaningful for each family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we kind of press forward in 2024, if rate cuts begin as early as March, you may see prices start to increase again. The anomaly here is that when interest rates increase on the supply and demand curve, typically you see demand fall and therefore prices fall. But because we have still such limited inventory, you saw prices stabilize, and they're going to make another run for inflation, right? So typically in Hawaii, every economist that I've ever talked to, the best analogy for Hawaii real estate is called the escalator, right? So escalator, as we all know, on the upward scale, you have a spike up, then a flatten out, then a spike up, then a flatten out, right? That's exactly what we saw for the last 2 years. Rather than seeing prices come down as fast as they went up, they stabilized.
Yeah, they just
Yes. And if rates come down again, I think we'll see rates back up. So while all of my opinions are just that, opinions, I am not a licensed person to give advice on the whereabouts of the economy in this next year. I do feel strongly that if memory and history does us any good, it would indicate that buying a home before that interest rate frenzy happens would behoove all homeowners and investors to do that now. So how do we get our investors and our people kind of out of that holiday hibernation mindset and into that hunting mindset? Is bringing the information to you guys. So that's our objective, is just to bring you the information. Do with it what you want. But I would hate for you in 6 months to be able to come back to us saying, hey, I want to invest. I'm like, right, you missed the boat. So we're just trying to bring that information to everyone.
Absolutely. And so one of the things we always advise is you got to make your money on the buy with investments. And so you can't offer over and still make a big fat margin there. It's really getting it on the buy. And if you want a home on sale, like we're saying, this is the time. You've got about 2 to 3 months window before things start to get competitive is what we're expecting. But I think just knowing that the homes are sitting right now, still 60, 90 days. So those sellers are super motivated. And when there's more demand and then we have multiple offers, it's a totally different story. So just sage wisdom from the last couple of years. But you have a video that we're going to about soft landing so that people can really understand that definition a little bit?
Yeah, so the Fed came out with a video just yesterday, just kind of speculating on what the Fed meeting for Jerome Powell kind of came out with in December. And I wanted to draw a distinction, is that inflation on a correction has really 2 or 3 points that I want to make sure that we understand. So there's deflation, which is the opposite of inflation. There's disinflation, which is the slowing of inflation. And then there's kind of like a recession, which is everything's kind of moving forward and down that path. So right now, what we are in is called disinflation, right? Things are still expensive, guys. Just the rate of inflation has slowed dramatically. But inflation is still a healthy part of our economy. We don't want it too far high. We don't want it too far low. Where we're at right now is we're starting to see things normalize. But rate relief may not look like 3 and 4%, right? Rate relief might be 5.5%. And so we have to understand that the new normal is going to dictate that, because we went through a pretty radical transformation when it comes to inflation over the last 18 months. And so this video will kind of help dispel maybe some of those misconceptions and maybe help illuminate kind of where we're headed for the next 12 to 24 months.
So for the person who's sitting on the bench, there's a couple things they need to figure out first before they reach out to a professional. Number one is, what kind of investment do you want to do? So there's a variety of them. You want to just go over the couple that we typically see?
Yeah. So our very first investor is probably the most traditional, and we see that as what I call a value add, or we For those in the cold country, we say BRR, right? So buy, renovate, rent, repeat, right? So you purchase a property, maybe the ugliest house on the nicest block. You put in some cosmetic things in there to kind of create some curb appeal, invest in the infrastructure so the house has a lot of longevity into it. Then you rent it out for a higher rent than you could currently. Then you repeat the process, right? And so in this case, instead of buy, renovate, rent, repeat, I'd even add another R into there, and it's refinance, right? Yeah. So you're going to buy, renovate, refinance, rent, repeat, and you're going to be able to capture a lot of that savings that's going to go into your pocket. So that's our first investor. So kind of the second investor, which probably gets the most hype, but probably is the most risky. Mm-hmm. And those are the flippers, right? So you get to see HGTV and every place online. You're seeing people flip houses, and it's glorious, right? You come into a hoarder house, you go in and you clean everything up, and you sell, and everybody makes a ton of money, and everyone's having champagne, right? Well, the dangers of that, right, is when you have an interest rate rising environment. All of your assumptions and your projections are for things to stay static. Well, when you buy a property when interest rates are 3 and you're trying to sell when they're at 6, it poses a problem for your projections, right? So you really kind of have to know the numbers to be gambling. And equally, there could be a situation where you're buying now at 6 and selling later at 5, right? Mm-hmm. And so it poses an opportunity for there as well. Consult your professionals, consult a team so that it can help walk through a lot of those scenarios with you so you're not left holding the bag. Some of the other investors that are kind of in there that are just a little bit different, right? There's things like wholesaling. There's a lot of different opportunities where people try to get in the contract before all it gets listed and then be able to sell it to flippers and things like that. There's a ton of opportunity that exists that way because there's door knockers. There's a lot of people that are going out and canvassing areas and organically trying to find opportunities, and they all play a special role into that, where people can kind of go and either develop or hold on to properties for the long term. But that's typically what we see.
Yeah, so those 2 ones. So determining which risk you feel comfortable with, number 1. And then pillar number 2 is going to be financing. So you're going to need some cash to be an investor. Yeah. You don't always need a ton. You don't need 50% at times. And so we can walk you through that. If you have limited cash, let's say you have 50 to 100,000, we can show you what that can provide versus if you have 200,000 plus, what that can provide you. And then pillar number 3 is to go shopping. So we literally start looking at homes. You're doing the canvassing. You're creating your own kind of pipeline of properties to review, and we help you crunch those numbers. And that's really where I've been learning the most getting involved with you, Michael, is just how to see the numbers on the back end. Because it's one thing to look at a property and think, man, this looks like a steal of a deal, right? But then we look at a couple of factors like paying all the interest upfront for a year. No one would think of that, right? And so there's a couple of things that you'll learn as you go through this process. And then what did I say? Number 3 or number 4, the next step is obviously to offer on a property, get it accepted. And then we close on it and we start the work. So really, it's just having a clear roadmap of where you want to go and the expectation you have with an investment property, and we'll help provide that resource. And you don't have to do it alone. I think that's one reason why a lot of people are on the bench is they think, hey, I got to be like Bigger Pocket Podcast and do it all by myself. But they don't do it by themselves. They have a whole team of people that help them. And so we want to be that team for you guys too, and just advise throughout the process. So for people who are interested, we've started up this little Hui of my past clients who are interested in doing this too. They have cash savings. They're interested in investing. So now we're kind of bringing some properties to them on a platter to say, hey, look at this opportunity. What do we think about it? Hey, let's research this case study. What do we think? Just so that you start to get the reps in and you start to understand the behind the scenes questions to ask. So if you're interested in that, definitely email me or Michael below. We'll have it in the description. But we would love to just start the conversation. Because again, just sitting on the sidelines isn't going to serve you or your family at all. It takes action and it takes curiosity. So we want to push you guys a little bit to take action during these next 2 months. But Michael, what's your email? What's the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, so we'll leave it in the description over here. Again, it's michael.libertini@hmg.direct. I'll leave my phone number inside the description. You guys can welcome to email, call, text, whatever is easiest for you guys. But again, to Marina's point, a lot of people feel a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of data that's there. everybody has that one property. They go, if I only own this, right? It would change my trajectory and how I'm living, my, total wealth building, and it would probably be a catalyst for a lot of people to start doing this more. And so what we want to do is remove that hurdle from a lot of people's thought processes and just allow them to go, hey, this is what can be done. Now, a lot of times, like you mentioned on our case studies, it's not perfect, right? And we're here to be I don't want to say the adult in the room, but we're trying to be like the eyes and ears of the pitfalls that exist inside of real estate investing. And we want to give you that information for free. So you guys don't go through this. The last thing we want is anyone to feel underprepared, showing up with a gunfight with a knife and being like, I'm going to do this incorrectly. So we want to provide our, history, our experience, our expertise to be able to give you the confidence to be able to go into a transaction and feel good about it. We also want you to bring deals to us to analyze, because if we're coming up with all these opportunities, we would just go and do them, right? Like, we want to share this stuff with everybody. And the only way we can share is when we start that dialogue. And that dialogue begins with, so if you do have that one property that is like, hey, if I were just able to get this would be amazing, bring it to us. We're happy to analyze it. Even if it's not on the market, it's fine. We just want you guys to get comfortable with how to look at real estate investing objectively and feel good about it for the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, just encouraging you guys to take action, get off the bench, just start to probe those questions and have a team, a round table of professionals there to advise you. That's number one. Okay. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you again with another video next week. I'm very excited. It's 2024, new year, new goals, new ambitions. It's going to be awesome. Okay.
Go get them, guys.